là durant tous ces events.
But the screen is going to or there will be no title.
Yeah.
Please have a seat.
Yes, no, only one slide. There's only one slide. Okay.
Yes, that we don't have much. So people need to use the headphone.
They have to use the headphones.
And they need to use that as well. When people are speaking, but when I'm speaking, I don't need to use that. It's okay? It's fine. So please, you need to put the headphone in order to hear. Yeah. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? So welcome colleagues to the WWF Pavilion for today's event that is on climate and biodiversity nexus, where we need to see our African perspective regarding how to break the silos between the two agendas. And we have 1 hour session, and we hope that it will be very fruitful and very interactive. And again, welcome. So just to say that we have just finished the COP16 in Cali the last 2 weeks, focusing on biodiversity. And during the next 2 weeks, we are going to kind of focusing on COP29. So the idea is really how we can build synergy between the two agendas. And today, I have really very great panelists that are going to share with us their perspective, because we are talking a lot about making this synergy, and it has evolved the last few years. But I think that it's time really to talk more and to think more about what kind of tangible actions that we can put in place linking the two agendas. And today's panelists, we have very, I would say, several categories of panelists. From the youth, from the human rights perspective, from the CSO perspective, from indigenous people perspective, and from WWF perspective. So I think it will be a very interesting discussion. And I will start first to ask the ladies. Ladies first, and we have also men that will intervene, but we'll start asking Shirley from WWF to come first, and followed by Gertrude. Please have a seat. Fura, have a seat, please. And Cindy. So in an event, we are used to see the photos and the moderator saying the bios of the panelists, but we have them here. We have their beautiful face here. So we will give the floor to them to introduce themselves. And before responding to the question that I'm going to ask, but maybe starting with my side. My name is Harisua, and I'm coordinating the WWF Africa Adaptation Hub. I'm based in Madagascar, but delivering this regional role for WWF. And partnership is key for us. And I think that addressing climate change is something that cannot be worked in silo, but need really strong partnership. So the reason today we bring on board new partner with us to discuss about this topic. So I will start with Shirley, And as said, before you respond to the question, if you can just introduce briefly yourself and your short bio in the way that you want to, people know you. So, in fact, WWF has recently developed a paper, a publication, on the synergies between NDCs and BSAPs and the National Adaptation Plan. So Shirley is going to share with you the key highlights from this report and why it matters for WWF. So over to you, Shirley.
Thanks, Harasoa. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. As Harasoa said, my name's Shirley Matheson. I work for WWF. My title is the Global NDC Enhancement Coordinator. So I very much, my work is all about NDCs. So hopefully I won't overburden you with too many acronyms. But it's lovely to be here. I work globally with our offices around the world on engaging on NDCs. So I'm really honored to be part of this panel to learn a bit more about some specific regional aspects. As Harasoa said, my capacity here today is to talk about our work that we've done on the climate and nature nexus. If you've been following our work, we published a report a few years ago, Climate Secret Ally, which really set out and what the IPCC 6th Assessment Report says about the relationship between climate and nature and why this is so vital. And I think everybody here understands there's such an important relationship between them. They're not really, we can't separate them. Underneath the Paris Agreement, as is in my job title, we have the nationally determined contributions. We also have the national adaptation plans. So we have a couple of mechanisms where we can set out on a nationally determined way how countries want to include this nexus. Underneath the Global Biodiversity Framework, we also have something which is a different acronym, the National Biodiversity Strategy, which I'm assuming you're all aware of. But very much kind of on the similar veins to say how do we look at the nature and within that, especially under Target 5, but across all the global biodiversity mandate is climate and how this fits into it. So the publication that Harasoa had mentioned, we did a partnership this year with IISD and with GIZ to develop our thinking around how we can look across all of these elements. And I think over the past couple of years, I have seen discussions on this, especially as we have the biodiversity plans coming out this year, NDCs coming out next year, so there's a lot of opportunity. But what we really wanted to do was to think about concretely what this would look like. And so I would encourage you to have a look at the publication, see if this is something which interests you, and if you have any ideas on how to further it, we would be really happy to discuss that. What we did here was we thought about developing these plans from the perspective of a cycle. So how do we develop them through 4 key phases? Assessment phase, so what is the key issue that we're trying to solve? Monitoring and reporting, goal setting, identifying goals and strategies, and finance and implementation. So across all of these different elements, what are the ways that we can create a synergistic approach? And the idea here is thinking about how can we be more efficient, more effective. It's not to make things more complicated, it's to make things easier. So across all of these areas, we developed suggested criteria, or rather it's a checklist of things to think about as you're developing your MBSAP and your NDC to pull out some of those synergies. We will be doing an event later this week where we look at it in detail, so please come along and look at it. But yeah, I think maybe I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer any questions, but yeah, I'll pass back to you.
Thanks so much, Shirley, for giving this background. And I think that's the idea of the event today, is really, because as said, I think we are talking about making the synergies, but what it should look like. And what does it mean in practice from the theory? And thanks so much, Shirley. I think that, as you said, the idea is not really complicating things in bringing these I would say, to approach together, but more how we can deliver more concrete action as well in bringing the 2 approaches, more on the reporting, on the monitoring, on the policy side, and also on the implementation. So we will go back to question later on. But next, I would like to to hear from Gertrude, from the rural women. I think that I will leave to her as well to introduce yourself and give you a short bio. It's a different way, but I think it's good. I really like valuing you as here and sharing about you instead of me. So go ahead, Gertrude. And the question for you is really, I would like to understand more what role women could play in really pushing forward this agenda. Is that something relevant from your perspective? And any challenges that you are facing around that? So over to you, Gertrude.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and thanks for inviting me. My name is Gertrude Kenyanji. I come from Support for Women in Agriculture and Environment, a community-based organization. I'm from the indigenous and local communities, forest dwelling, hands on the plow kind of people. Well, I'm going to answer your question differently. I'm not going to answer it the way you expect, because loss of biodiversity and collapse of ecosystems have devastating consequences on people and the planet. It's on people, not just on women. So I prefer that we look at these roles as I wouldn't like to outline just the roles of women. I would like to profile all roles of all people, because the effects, the devastating effects, are on all people. And if I just look at women alone, if I sit here and drill out the roles of women, I would be expecting someone beside me to reel out the roles of men afterwards, if it's going to be equitable and different, not business as usual, not heaping extra workload on women. So what I'm saying is that together as humanity, we should transition to a low carbon production in agriculture, forestry, and fisheries together as humanity, so that we can reduce the human footprint on the natural ecosystems and also reduce the destruction to the ozone layer. And again, I'd also like that that we should, together as humanity, and especially the decision makers, we should all ensure equitable distribution, equitable access to, control of, and decision making regarding natural resources, so that men and women have equal access, equal control, and equal decision making, enabling women to perform the roles that you're expecting them to perform. And then even interventions that come in to hold, I'm speaking from the perspective, I'm an indigenous person and local community person, interventions like market mechanisms, like Red Plus, that come in to intervene, to hold biodiversity loss. They should be rights-based. They should adopt a rights-based approach. They should respect and protect the rights of those indigenous people that they found in the place, the rights holders in the first place. And then the benefits that accrue should be equitably and gender responsively shared, so that both men and women benefit from like carbon credits, like biodiversity credits nowadays, that they equitably have a share. What do I mean by gender responsively? For instance, there's this approach of plowing back the benefits of conservation into the community. It should be gender responsive. For instance, if you construct a health facility, you must ensure that you have a maternity ward that's well equipped, that's fully functional to take care of the needs of women. That means that you've taken into consideration the needs of women. It's only when we have shared equitably the resources and things are gender responsive And they are investing into technologies that relieve women of heavy unpaid care work burden. Only then will you do what you expected me to say at the beginning, that women, the role of women is to plant trees, is to adopt technologies that save energy, is to construct tanks that for rainwater harvesting, is to do agroecology and that sort of thing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Gertrude. I think that's something that I pick is really maybe linking that to the topic today is how we can making sure the gender responsive approach in delivering this climate and biodiversity nexus. Something that we need to explore more. But for sure, sometimes when we are talking about women, the idea is not that to put men behind, but really how to make sure that this equality. So I think I've heard about this term positive masculinity. I'm trying to understand better even now what is that. But I think that that's still something behind pushing for the gender balance as well. But thanks so much, Jed, to bringing that up. So the next, I am going to ask Cindy from the indigenous people perspective, if she can share her insights on the topic, moving from women and people on in general, and then really looking at the IPLC perspective on how we can move forward with this agenda regarding biodiversity and climate. Yeah, over to you, Cindy. And again, please introduce yourself and share to us what you'd like to share about you.
Thank you, Harisoa. Greetings, everyone. My name is Cindy Kobe. I'm from the indigenous Ogiek community of the Mau Forest in Kenya, and I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I work for, I co-founded an indigenous youth organization which is called Tirap Youth Trust, and also I also work with FSC Indigenous Foundation, which is a global organization working with indigenous peoples and local communities and also indigenous peoples organizations. With regards to the question on how to make the climate and biodiversity agenda better, especially from an indigenous people's perspective, is first of all, we first need to put indigenous peoples and local communities as separate groups, because in the UNFCCC, indigenous peoples is the only constituency that is recognized. We don't have a constituency for local communities. So we need to have the two as distinct groups, because the problems of indigenous peoples and the problems of local communities are very different. And the other thing is that, especially as African indigenous peoples, is we need to advocate for inclusion of traditional knowledge, indigenous traditional ecological knowledge into these processes, because I think there's so many people doing research on documentation of indigenous people's knowledge, but we need to have more of this. And I'll give an example of my community. So for the Ogiek peoples, we have an Ogiek Cultural Center, and the Ogiek Cultural Center houses our knowledge. It houses we have trainings on indigenous on the Ogiek language. We also have a museum that documents that shows all the things that we used to do. For example, if it's we are traditional beekeepers and we are hunters and gatherers. So all the materials that we used to use for hunting and gathering, we have them in the museum, in the Ogiek Cultural Center. It's located in Narok. If you Google it, you'll find it. In Garetta, in Narok County, and we also have traditional huts that we used to live in a long time ago, that we no longer live in due to evictions from our ancestral home. So we have samples of those huts there. We also have a herbarium, the herbarium that has the traditional medicine that we use. We still use to date. I still use the traditional medicine from that herbarium, and we use that to protect this knowledge and to transfer it to the next generations. So I'll teach my children. I was taught by my mom, So I'll do that the same, and it will go like that, till so that the knowledge will not get lost at the end of the day. And the importance of this kind of traditional knowledge is to protect our biodiversity. Through this Oge Cultural Center, and there are so many Oge cultural centers across Africa, you're able to protect the knowledge of our ancestors, of our elders. We are also able, they teach us how to ensure that our land is regenerating. For lands that are prone to soil erosion, for example, they use aloe vera to protect the land and to protect the soil, and it becomes more healthy as a result. And how did I know this? Because of the round table that we normally have with our elders, through our cultural center, and through the trainings that we normally have. So at the cultural center, we also have trainings. We have language. They teach us the language. They transfer the knowledge to young people like myself. And then now the chain of knowledge transfer starts from the cultural center, and that's why we encourage other indigenous communities to have the same. And not only that, but also research. So when we talk about research, we're talking about the modern kind of research, but merging the two knowledge systems. So if it's because in the indigenous, we have our own way of research, and the other, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, I'll call it the Western research system. So we can find a way of merging the two systems. And then with regards to participation in these forums, um, I um, I was attending another event, and something struck to me, and we were reminded that we need to, as African indigenous peoples, we need to participate more in these sub-regional forums, not only the UNFCCC, but also forums like in the AU. We also have forums in the ECOWAS. We also have forums of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in Gambia. So such forums are important so we can build the foundation and build momentum for this discussion. When you start at the sub-regional level, let's say at the East African Community level, we can come to the ECOWAS level, and then we're now at the AU level. And by the time we come to the global level, we are better organized, we are better, we have our strategies in place, we have our priority areas. We're not coming here to plan again, but we've already planned. So there's better planning, there's better organization. We are speaking in one voice, and we are not coming here to figure things out, because we've already figured things out at the local level. That's it for now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cindy. And I think one thing that I think from you is how we can really value the traditional knowledge when really pushing for this agenda regarding climate and biodiversity. I think that is something that we need to explore, and how we can engage more as well the IPLC in all of these forums, and where we can really ramp up the voice of IPLC in this topic. And I would say that all of these questions that we are asking ourselves are something that we need to unlock, and not just talking about we need to make the synergies, but in concrete how we can do that together. So next, I think bringing as well another perspective from the human right perspective, something that I'm really keen, and I think I'm sure all of us are really keen to hear why human rights are here and what human rights people are thinking about this, linking these two agendas. So I would like to give the floor to Furaha Charo. I hope that I spell it well. And again, please introduce yourself and share what you want to share to the audiences about you.
Yes, thank you so much. So my name is Furaha Charo. I work for the Network of African National Human Rights Institutions. Its secretariat is based in Nairobi. I'm Kenyan, so I'm also based in Nairobi. So the Network of African National Regional Institutions, it comprises national human rights institutions from Africa. So at the moment, we are working with 47 national human rights institutions in Africa. And as my colleagues here were speaking, I felt they had already talked quite a lot already about the issues of human rights, because when you talk about human rights, we talk about rights of men and women, we talk about rights of indigenous communities, we talk about, we talk about rights overboard. And so for us, what we do is that one of the key gaps that we have seen when it comes to engaging with infusing human rights in the whole conversation is that you find national human rights institutions are really, they are not proactively engaged in climate change and also biodiversity conversations. For instance, when we talk about the development of, development of national biodiversity action plans, you find that national human rights institutions are not actively involved in those processes. And also looking at issues of development of the national adaptation plans, and also the development of the NDCs. And yet, they are very crucial stakeholder that are really key in infusing that human rights lens in the development of these very important policy processes, because national human rights institutions, by their whole formation, they are autonomous institutions, and also they are very key, or their mandate is on the promotion and protection of human rights, and also monitoring and advisory to the government on matters of human rights. And therefore, they are very key stakeholder in the whole conversation on biodiversity and climate change, because we all know that climate change has a huge impact on human rights. And talk about the right to food, the right to shelter, livelihoods, culture. It's all the issues are human rights issues. And so actually what we've been doing as the network is that apart from doing capacity building, it's also trying to create spaces for national human rights institutions to engage. Because, for instance, during in the planning for the COP, we were surprised actually to learn that human rights institutions, most of them, they come as observers, rather than them having a table in most of these conversations. Because when you look at issues of adaptation, issues of Article 6, when you look at whole issues of climate finance, which are all linked to human rights, you find that they are really key in infusing that human rights lens, that human rights angle in how to sustainably address climate change and biodiversity in a way that is integrated, in a way that looks at issues of climate change, biodiversity, and also human rights. And so for me, my what I feel maybe needs to be done more moving forward, it's active engagements with national human rights institutions, because of their mandate when it comes to human rights, and also the fact that they also engage actively with the regional mechanisms. For instance, the African Commission and the respective working groups on human rights. Because with the African Commission, for instance, national human rights institutions, they have observer status, and therefore they are able to also report and also inform the also international reporting mechanisms. So for me, I think moving forward, perhaps there's an opportunity there to really engage national human rights institutions in ongoing conversations on biodiversity and also climate change. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Fura. And I think that there is a call to action, really how we can increase the involvement of women rights in this process. So I think that everyone has heard about that and how to make it work. And it's good that we are voicing for that and really need it. So now I think we are done with the four ladies. And for sure that we want to make sure that giving the same voices for men and women. So to start, as we are now opening to do the Q&A, but to start, giving first some insight for our two guests, men guests, to make sure that we have these equal voices from women and men. So I'm going to ask first the Pagja. based on what our beautiful four ladies have said about these linkages between climate and biodiversity. So we'd like to hear from PACTA as a Pan-African CSO Alliance in Africa. I know that probably it's already part of the agenda that you are pushing for right now, but we would like to hear more insight from you as well, how far it is progressing, and in any challenges that you would like to share, any opportunities as well as a Pan-African Alliance. Yeah, over to you. And please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you very much, Arizona. It's a great opportunity to be here and excellent panel. Congratulations to all of you. Very important remarks. And to put forth a couple of points. Number one, I think the panel and the discussions are at the right time because we have just finished NDC2 and we are expected to develop NDC3s. And that will bring us number of questions. So, why, and for obvious reasons in Africa, I think NDC2 was not implemented because most of our NDCs were incumbent on the finances that comes. It was conditional. 80% of the money has to come from outside. I am from Ethiopia, Satish Kumar. I work for NABU, Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union, but I am also part of the PACTA Alliance. So just in Ethiopia, my colleagues, they did an assessment and they found out that we had only 1% of finances that we had request for our NDC implementation has flown in. I think in overall Africa, it would not be more than 2%. So that's one issue that I would ask all of us to think about, because leave alone the issue of the parks, the biodiversity not being part of NDCs, even the NDC implementation itself is in a big shaky wicket, and then so how do we go in that respect to NDC3? So I would throw more questions to us so that we can continue to reflect. And the second one, I think I'm sure your study has brought out a lot of these issues, but one is, I think for all of us in our respective countries, especially in Kenya and other parts, I think as well as in Ethiopia, I think the institutional fragmentation has to be addressed. Because the NDCs are the national, literally they are the national developmental plans, but like we work in isolation in many of the countries. I'm sure those who attended Biodiversity COP, maybe just less than 0.1% are here in the climate COP. So that's a reflection of how fragmented we are within each of our countries. I think this is also a time to address them. And then I think I suggest that each of us go back and do a quick assessment of whether we had the biodiversity, forest and other issues properly addressed within the NDC2. If not, then I think it's a good opportunity to forward comments and suggestions. So at least in Ethiopia's case, for example, we have the Ethiopian Biodiversity Institute, which is an institution, a commission that is positioned under the Ministry of Agriculture. But when it comes to climate change, then it is with the, similarly the Ethiopian Wildlife Conservation Authority is also under, the Ethiopian Wildlife Conservation Authority is under Ministry of Culture, and then the climate change is within the Ministry of Planning and Development. So, then you see that, there is a fragmentation there, and I think we need to bring them together as WWF and as all of us. I think that's so that will help us to mainstream what we are discussing here, what the problems are, because I think Arizona can have more data, but roughly when I Googled, I think there are 3,000 national parks in various forms of legal entities within Africa. So who's going to, I think you all spoke about human rights, you all spoke about indigenous rights. So who's going to speak about the rights of those parks and those who are dwelling there, including the indigenous people? So we need to be we need to be their voice to speak about it. So that's second one about the mainstreaming into the NDC3s. And another point that I want to make is that I think we need to change the narrative a little bit in terms of indigenous knowledge. I would like us to call it indigenous science, because we are trying to relegate, when you say, indigenous knowledge, it's a repository of everything that has come through, ages, and then we need to bring that out. But especially our university seems to relegate that into somewhere down there. They say, okay, this is not science. So I think we need to also make our universities to talk about indigenous science, and bring that on board of decision-making processes. So I'm sure that a farmer in Ethiopia, when he predicts that there will be rain this afternoon or not, is much more accurate than what the meteorology department does, because it's over a million of thousands of years how they have it's through the observations they know what works, and the cloud, the wind speed and everything. So I think the indigenous science issues have to be also addressed. And I will stop here. I know that we have you wanted it to be interactive, but I think it's an important thing that we need to also mainstream this into the climate change negotiating groups and climate change discourses. Sometimes we need to also do the other way, the mainstreaming into the other side. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for this, I would say, good insights, and for thoughts and for action as well. And now I'm moving to the youth perspective, and Eve is part of the youth climate negotiator. So I think that maybe another perspective as well, based on what has been said by the other panelists. If you could share from the youth perspective, and also introduce yourself. Yeah.
So thank you so much. Eve Tangivziza, one of the youth negotiator program, and it's a program that supports youth to be in the rooms of negotiations and speaking on linkages between NDCs and the CBD. I think it's very closely linked, and trying to look at the lenses of youth. What we are doing, I'm working in Kaze Green Economy. It's a youth-based organization that promotes energy transition in Burundi, and we are promoting clean cooking. And if clean cooking maybe doesn't speak you well, it's an issue that is causing threatening our forest, because the total forest of Burundi was threatening to disappear in 23 years if the people would continue using wood-based fuels. So what we do in our country, we trying to bring upon solutions. We bring upon alternative fuels using agricultural residues and improved cookstoves, promoting biogas. And this is a very great point because it serves the forests and biodiversity, but also it helps the country meet its NDCs. And it's something very important. So I would say that even to meet our NDCs, the country does count a lot of the work we have been doing in promoting clean cooking. So I think these are very close, and it's also interesting to be in the negotiations room to see how the topics and the different thematics come together, especially when we're talking about the NCQG, and how country being discussing about how we achieve that the NDCs are met. And this is a very interesting to see the linkages between those two thematics. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eve. I think that we've seen really, I would say, wide perspective from several stakeholders, and that's make the difference. When you bring together our ideas together, our thoughts together, and how we can really transform the dots. And as said, we've talked much about this climate and biodiversity nexus, how we are going to break silos. I think that we've heard today some ideas on how to do so. And thanks so much for the panelists. And now I'm going to open the floor to the audiences. We still have like 10 minutes. Anything that you'd like to, any question to the panelists, any ideas from you guys as well, any recommendation as well. Just take the opportunity to speak today. Yeah. And please say your name and your organization.
My name is Gibson Pepo. I'm a Malawian. Um, my question goes to Cindy. But let me start by giving a small background on the youth in Malawi and their perception on the indigenous knowledge system, indigenous local knowledge, and what have you. The general picture is that the youth consider anything to do with the local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, as associated with poverty, as associated with somebody who doesn't really matter much in a society, something like that. So you find that actually engaging the youth in the indigenous things, indigenous farming, indigenous what have you, there's a general resistance because of the Western styles. They consider Western systems as more advanced and associated with rich people. So my question was, I wanted to learn from you how you managed to interest the youth. You managed to mobilize them so that you eventually ended up with forming this organization, because we wanted we would like to do the same in Malawi, mobilize the youth to take indigenous knowledge systems and what have you in conservation.
Thank you. I'm going to take the question first and then giving the floor to the panelists. Any other question, even some curiosity as well to know more. Please take the time to speak, colleagues. Yes?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kinoti from Kenya. I work with Crown Trust. My question goes to all the panelists. Because you've all brought up the aspect of collaboration and Africans coming together for a common goal, how do you visualize this happening? Because with the many pavilions I've gone to, and you find that we are quite divided, and our stand doesn't really come out clear. Even in the meeting rooms, you find that we don't really make a common stand. How do you see this happening? How can we make this happen as people from, because I understand that with East Africa, we've divided ourselves. So you find that in some of the issues that have been brought up, we have a common stand. But as a whole unit, as Africa, because we are quite big and we are all doing a lot of work to bring out better stands and to change the climate conversation to a more resilient, to become more resilient. How do you see this happening? How do we make this happen?
Thanks so much. I need one man and one woman. So then giving back to the panelists. Yes, Norbert.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mine is not a question, but just an input. I think most of the times when you're looking at the siloed approach which has been given to climate and biodiversity, to me it's always a systemic problem of which we as civil societies really need to take an active role, especially when international frameworks are being developed, so that we see how we can synergize these two. Because at the end of the day, as we are speaking, climate change, I think, is the second driver to biodiversity loss after agriculture. But soon, statistics are showing that in the next few years, then climate will be actually the key driver to biodiversity loss. On the other hand, you will also get that biodiversity, maybe initiative, also have some impact on the environment. So looking at these synergies, then at the GBF level, or maybe at the UNFC, because in 2020 we are all aware that the IPBES and IPCC tried to do a joint workshop that they were looking at how then to look at synergizing these two. But it's something that has not actually taken off well. So the question which we should be asking ourselves is what role are we as civil societies playing at this international policy making level for us to influence the process so that when we are coming to develop the NBSAPs or when we are coming to develop the national adaptation plans or maybe the national climate change action plans, then all these synergies are actually taken on board. Because if you look at the NBSAP in your countries vis-a-vis the national climate change action plans, just go and do a quick search and see how maybe each is addressing the other aspect. If you just search on NBSAP, look at climate change, very few or maybe perspectives have been put on board, and the same with the National Climate Change Action Plan. If you just search and then look at biodiversity, it's really there. So if that is addressed at that level, then I think we can be winning this war. Thank you.
Thank you, Norbert. Any women or woman that want to say something? No? So then I'm suggesting you ladies, and in case you have any thoughts as well, the two men of the team, we have like 10 minutes left. So if you can respond to the question that goes to you, and in ending your talk as well, if you can just say your last word. You have already said much, but any last messages, what could be done differently regarding this climate and biodiversity nexus? So I'm challenging you a bit to say all of this in 2 minutes each. Yeah, thank you. From you, Fura. I'm sorry.
Furaha. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so for me, I'll respond to the question from my good sister from Kenya. Yeah, I think definitely as Africa we can do better in terms of coordination. And I think we have so many opportunities for that. One of them being we have PACJA, the network that coordinates, it's Pan-African Climate Justice Network, which is really regional. And then there's we have also AMSEN. AMSEN is the Africa Ministerial Conference on Environment. I know maybe the challenge, I'd say maybe for instance, some of these maybe institutions, maybe they are not, maybe them being known, it has not, like they are not widely known maybe at the region. But I think these are definitely opportunities that we need to tap into and see then how can we leverage on these existing regional and continental platforms so as to consolidate our positions and to come together. And also, of course, working together with the African group of negotiators. So I'd say we have a lot of, we have a lot of these opportunities that perhaps within the respective institutions that we work with, we can map out and see how we can leverage on these networks in bringing together all these different voices for better coordination and positioning in preparation for such high-level conferences like now the COP, which are very crucial in terms of presenting our interests and also safeguarding our interests. So that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Well, just a couple of things I think on what we can do in this space. Speaking from the kind of global perspective, I think there's some structures in place which support the development of NDCs and NBSAPs. I think they're already going in the direction to thinking together, and I think we can maybe try to encourage this more. I think it would be really important, especially as we're having lots of discussions about funding. It was really disappointing that we didn't come out with climate finance for nature. And I don't want this to be forgotten. We are having conversations about climate, but they're different. And I think we really need to think carefully about how we want to have that discussion. There's a few things coming out of the global stocktake, and we will be going into a new global stocktake. And again, referencing the great comments by Cindy, I think this is where we find a really strong space for Indigenous science, Indigenous knowledge, and make sure that that's really represented from the region. And finally, I think on the discussions at the CBD really thought about climate and nature. I think the question is, are we really thinking about it strongly enough in the UNFCCC space? So do we need a parallel discussion, a work program, or something which can really talk about the links between climate and nature, which can really solidify this relationship? And then I just wanted to say, I mean, it's come up in a few discussions. I don't know if anybody's really missed having the regional climate weeks this year. I've really missed it. And I think I would like to see something take that space up. I'm talking about Africa, but I'm talking about all other regions, because I think we really saw last time around when we were looking at the NDCs, which there were some common messages coming on a regional level, and having a space to really discuss that was really important. So I might stop there, but thank you. I'll pass on to you, Gertrude.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for the questions and the comments. Yeah. Yes, I'm going to respond to collaboration, and I'm going to say that it's not bad to have diversity, but we can have harmony in diversity. In fact, we can bring the richness of every other culture and merge it with every other culture, and then we shall be able, I think it will create synergies in that way. We'll be able to do better with two things than it would be individually. Would be able to do when we added the individual goodness from each side. So I look at synergizing as a very good way, while we remain in our diversity, harmony in diversity. As my last word, I would like to say that we should bring the marginal, the issues of the marginalized, the vulnerable women, from the marginal locations to the center of the discussions. We should have institutional rules must change, resources must be redistributed, and the underlying incentive structure must change, so that the women are effective in contributing to this climate change fight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions and for your comments. I think the panelists have exhaustively responded to the question on unity, and I will respond to the question from my Malawian brother about the work that we are doing with regards to indigenous knowledge. So I think the mindset that most of the youth have is it's a colonial mindset, because if they are thinking that practicing indigenous practices is for lack of a better, it's traditional and backward, which is not true. So for us, we did a lot of capacity building, we did a lot of trainings, so that we can change their mindset first of all, and then after we have changed their mindset, now we started engaging them in these processes of documentation of indigenous knowledge, engaging them in even things like art, things that are interesting, like music, songs, poetry, things like those. You start there, and then it will build up to matters on documenting our ecological knowledge now, on if it's how to protect the trees, how do we protect the land, how do we ensure that we are regenerating. So we start there as we build a space and momentum, but I'm happy to have a bilateral after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. You're fine. I think that we are really ending the session, and I would say that it has been really a very fruitful session. And maybe from us is really this unity, how we can come together and really to address the synergies between climate and biodiversity, but more moving from commitment to actions as well. I think that's really something that we want, really, what Africa we want in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years. So it's time to change the dots and really moving from talking, from commitment to actions. And it needs really this unity, this cross collaboration, and I think starting from today as well, where we bring together the human rights voices, the women voices, the IPLC voices, the CSO voices, the youth voices, and organization voices. As together we can change the dots. And as said by WWF, together we can. So thank you so much, our panelists, and thank you so much as well the audiences. And wish you as well a fruitful COP together. And let's make some great commitment in this COP29, and I'm sure that all of us can. So thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon or the evening. So maybe a clap for everyone, and let's take a photo. Yes, yes, yes. And if you have any question as well to the panelists, please feel free to approach them. Yeah. And let's take a photo together. Let's go, Malis.